Thank you for joining us as we discuss fulfilling your promise of a responsive design with SharePoint. We've got an hour slotted, which will include a presentation and time for questions at the end. You are all in listen-only mode, so you need to enter your questions into the GoToWebinar panel, which you should see on your screen. And you will also be presented with a survey right on your screen following the Q&A. So please take a few moments to complete that before you exit the webinar. Today's presenter is Justin Sypek. Justin is the Global Microsoft Practice Director here at Microexcel, and he has many years of experience working with the SharePoint platform. Today he will share his expertise with us on how he's been able to fulfill promises of a responsive design in SharePoint. So with that, let me introduce Justin Sypek.
Hi everybody, how's everybody doing today? Appreciate you taking the time out to listen to what we have to say, and I hope that you get some value out of this webinar. Moving forward, I just wanted to do a brief introduction about Microexcel and who we are. So we are an IT services firm focused on empowering our businesses, with solutions that developed across a variety of technologies. Now, Microsoft obviously is one of our major technologies that we service. That's why we're providing you a responsive design on SharePoint. But understand that we sort of blend all of our different practice areas, including our interactive services, with what we deliver from a Microsoft space. So that's why we are providing you with a responsive design on SharePoint itself. So let's get to the agenda. We're going to talk about a couple of things, right? We're going to talk about the need. Why do we need a responsive design? What is the value that you're going to get? What are you going to provide to your businesses? All right, we're going to talk about a couple of design concepts itself, different designs for building out of web technologies, albeit intranets, extranets, or internets. We'll talk about some of the building blocks, like how do we now implement that design, and then we'll talk about SharePoint and how does the capabilities that exist within that platform either help or hinder what we're trying to provide in terms of that responsive layout itself. Finally, we'll sort of go through a scenario where we have developed a responsive design on top of SharePoint and see some of those capabilities, and we'll end it with some questions through that panel, as Jill had mentioned. Before we start, we wanted to grab a quick poll from the audience on what version of SharePoint you folks are currently leveraging today. So if you don't mind, please take a minute and fill that out. Looks like a good amount of people are already taking advantage of SharePoint 2013, and I think that that's going to resonate well with this presentation. A lot of what you're going to see is developed on top of SharePoint 2013, and with the additional capabilities within that platform, I think that you'll be on your way to being able to provide a responsive design within your SharePoint 2013 sites. And let's get into it. Let's get into what the need is. So obviously the need today is that we cannot develop a single design targeted at a single platform or a single device anymore, right? Consumers have far too many choices in terms of operating systems and screen resolutions, various form factors, different browsers. So us as designers and as developers need to take all of that into consideration and still provide a rich and modern design based on those variety of devices. So it begs the question, how do we as the implementers actually provide these different designs, right? If a user is going to view a web page on a mobile device, obviously we want to be able to target content that is most accessible and what we're trying to promote at the top, whereas in a desktop view, obviously I've got a lot more screen real estate and I can provide a lot more information within that space. So I think that we'll talk about how we can provide you with the building blocks like I had mentioned in order to develop something very similar to what you see here. So obviously the core focus of this conversation is about a responsive design or a responsive page layout. So for those of you that don't understand what a responsive design is, it's basically providing a single design through HTML, CSS that adapts and renders the page display based on the devices that we're viewing it on. So we're really targeting desktop devices, so larger screens, larger televisions, big monitors, etc., laptops. Those are going to be targeted for the majority of your information, right? That's where you're going to get the majority of the content displayed in a very rich fashion. And then we're going to discuss what a tablet view may look like. And with the screen resolutions that we have on the tablets, we can still pump a lot of content in on those tablet devices. However, we're probably going to adjust the layout quite a bit, right? You may not have a left to right navigation where you may have an up and down navigation for a majority of your information. And then when you talk about displaying on a mobile device, right, we're really talking about targeting information for the users, providing those touch-friendly buttons, touch-friendly designs, and maybe eliminating, or not eliminating, but shrinking a lot of the imagery that you may have across your, desktop and tablet views. So how do we do a lot of that? Well, we'll talk about it, but we're basically just providing some responsive layouts, some liquid layouts, developing some responsive grids, using those media query breakpoints, which is going to allow us to target certain areas. And what that, again, is going to do is be able to provide you with some information and provide you with some designs that are going to target the audience based on, again, that form factor. So if we take an example that we have up on the screen now, you can see that we've got a desktop view, and obviously we are leveraging a lot of initial screen real estate just with some eye-popping imagery. We've got a lot of information that sits below that, right? And we're really targeting people to find a professional. So that's the majority of the message that we're trying to send. You see that we've got a global navigation that has some maybe quick links, and then up in the top right you've got your login content. Well, when we talk about developing a responsive design, it's not necessarily just saying, I want to shrink all of these images. I want to shrink the size of my text boxes. I want to shrink my navigation, etc., etc. It's about reimagining how that content is displayed across that device, as well as what content do I want to target for immediate viewing when I open that page. So if we take a look at the design that we have here, we've taken that navigation, right, and we've shrunk that into a little icon that allows us to expand the navigation. So anybody that's gone to a mobile site, a mobile targeted site on their mobile device, or have developed or have viewed an app, right, this is very common across the way that we manage our global navigation or our filtering options, etc., on those mobile devices. Another thing that you notice is that we're really highlighting that login here, and that is because you want to, again, provide that touch-friendly capability, and we want to highlight people to sign up for using this specific application. We've taken that Find a Professional and we've slightly adjusted the visualization on it. And we want people to enter a zip code here, whereas they may enter a full address on the desktop. Again, trying to understand that they're going to be using a keypad that's targeted to that mobile device. So the less information that they need to type in, the better for them, right? And then we want to highlight, let's say, some of our offerings, right? So we want to highlight that we've got some gift certificates available, and that information may be below on that desktop device because, again, you probably have a lot more screen real estate to be able to show you. So what we want to do is we want to provide that single design. We want to provide that single visualization, that HTML and CSS blend, which will allow us to do this responsiveness. Obviously, scrolling is inevitable on those mobile devices. It's just how do I minimize the amount of scrolling while maximizing the value out of that initial page load. So now we're going to talk about a few of the design concepts related to responsive designs, right? So responsive designs, also known as RWD, responsive web design, really adapts the layout of viewing of an environment by using fluid and proportional based grids, flexible images, CSS3, and really media queries are the big part of being able to provide that responsive experience across those different devices. I'm going to leverage breakpoints, and we're really going to leverage grids. I'm going to show you a little bit about that, right? So here's an idea, and this is a good reference material for anybody that's looking to develop some responsive design, or maybe get a little bit more detailed, or watch some videos or some just general sample coding. If you go to the link on the bottom, right, Google has some design spec layouts, and there's a responsive UI HTML where you're going to see some of this information, and it's going to sort of walk you through the hows and how-nots of being able to provide this. But I want to just highlight some of these scenarios because I think that the breakpoints are probably a very valuable part of understanding what we're trying to deliver throughout this design. So if you notice, I've got, through responsive web design, we really target 12 columns from a visual perspective. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to leverage the layout of those 12 columns to really provide n number of capabilities throughout that, that visualization. So if you take a look, we've got some handheld small devices, which maybe we're going to target only showing 4 columns of content on, because again, the screen resolution is going to be up to 480 pixels. Then we've got some a bit larger, and these are some of our larger phone devices that maybe go up to 960 pixels. And then we've got our iPads, and then we've got our desktop views, right? So you can see how much we can fit in either portrait or landscape modes, right? Because obviously, if I'm looking at a website and I flip my phone over to be in landscape, I'm going to have more materials that I can display from a left to right column, but not from a top to bottom. So these are all things that need to be taken into consideration when you're putting these designs in place. And certainly putting designs in place before you start the actual implementation is going to yield you the best value, where you actually get to say, well, most of my consumers use XYZ devices, and they leverage them for, in these different, portrait or landscape modes, because they're using other applications that may be targeted at those other viewing sizes as well. So you may want to target what you are providing, again, to your end customers, so they have sort of a consistent experience, not only across the website and the apps that you're developing, but what they're using that device for in and of itself. So we've taken these 12 columns, and what you can do is you can actually build these into different grids. Now I've only got a couple of grids here, but what you can see is, so on a desktop, we may use this grid system to be able to provide you with different layouts. So these are different, let's say, zones where you're going to be putting content in. So I can take those zones, and I can have one large zone, and that expands from, left to rightmost of my my viewport. And then I can, let's say, give 50% widths. I can give 25% widths. But then I can do things where I'm taking, thirds and 2/3 and sort of adjusting that. So when you get into a tablet, right, you have that same layout, because like I said, there's a lot of screen real estate. There's a lot of pixels there to be able to implement this on. So what we're doing is we're just shrinking the size of those different viewing areas. But then when we get to a mobile device, now it's about restructuring and relaying out of that information, where I want to highlight, number 1 up at the top, number 2, number 3, etc. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go in that order, because when I mentioned, when you're coming up with these responsive designs, one of the things that you want to be able to ensure is that you are highlighting the content that you really want to deliver to your end customers. So we've got those basic grid and layouts. So we're going to talk about coming up with some designs. So there certainly is a mobile-first design, and I think this is probably, if you're developing something which is really going to be used for a mobile workforce, for somebody that is out in the field, or if you're really looking to develop an app, let's say, but maybe you don't want to publish that app within a variety of marketplaces, you just want your app to run as a website, right? You're going to really develop this mobile-first design. This mobile-first design is going to allow you to create the viewing that you would on a mobile device and then begin to progressively enhance that design by adding more content and more features as I scale up on that screen resolution, right? And you can see some of the statistics. There's over 1.2 billion mobile web users in the world today, and over the last 10 years, that certainly has increased, and that trend is certainly looking to continue to move forward. Mobile apps have been downloaded over 10 billion times. People are using their devices, and I know in my household we've got 5 mobile phones, we've got 5 tablets, and we've got desktops. But the majority of the time, if we're going to look for some quick information, that's being done on your mobile device, right? It's not using your laptop anymore to go search the internet and actually be able to make purchases, etc., etc. You're doing those on your mobile devices, which is why we really need to begin to target those mobile designs. And I think you all understand that and certainly see that there's value here. It's just how do we actually perform that? So here's an example of an application that we're developing, and this happens to be delivered on SharePoint itself. So this is a SharePoint Online mobile application that we have developed, leveraging Azure as a backend. So it's sort of a patient care notification system where you're notifying providers, physicians themselves, of critical alerts or general alerts, or allowing to see your on-call schedules, or searching for additional physicians, etc., etc. And again, this is being targeted towards mobile devices because those physicians are on the run, they're at different locations all the time, and they certainly aren't carrying a laptop around. However, it's being delivered on SharePoint because the administrative tasks and the management of this is done through, your typical desktop workers. So it definitely was a strategic platform to leverage, but you can see how you can build a very targeted mobile design leveraging SharePoint if you take a mobile-first view into something. Well, obviously the opposite of a mobile-first would be a desktop-first design. And as you can tell, this is going to basically be the opposite, where you're going to develop your desktop design, you're going to build that out, and then you're going to leverage media queries, within your CSS to start filtering information or to start resizing or readjusting information based on those specific devices and the specific viewports. And what we see, especially in the SharePoint spaces, is although this may not be the best approach to develop a rich and tight mobile application, it's probably the most common that we see from delivering some type of portals that are built on top of SharePoint for those various form factors, so for the tablets and for the mobile devices, because you are going to be laying this on top of a SharePoint master page, and a lot of your workflows and a lot of your forms and a lot of your content management is all done through those information workers that are sitting at their desktops. And what you want to do is you want to provide an additional capability of them to be able to view this on their mobile devices themselves, which is why you really take that desktop first and bring that into a mobile. So here's just another example of what you're going to do here, where you're going to develop for your desktop, right? There's great information here. And then as you build your mobile device, what you end up doing is, all right, so I've scaled that image down a little bit slower, right? So I've increased the size of the login button. I've highlighted our current 80,000 professionals. I've certainly taken that little red triangle where you get your 15 free, and I've highlighted that as an initial offering. So I've done some adjusting there of my content, but for the most part, you can tell that this is a desktop first application that we have just provided a nice and mobile friendly design for. So now we've talked about the need. I think everybody understands that, as I had mentioned. So now we're going to talk about how do we actually get there. Well, there have been various design layouts over time that people have built websites for, right? There is certainly a fixed layout, which means I am going to fix some n number of columns, right? I'm going to fix some zones, let's say, to a certain pixel. And I'm going to put in some very fixed borders around that. And based on the size of the desktop, let's say, that I'm going to view this on, I'm going to just adjust the left and right divs to be able to make sure that the content that I have is centered on my page and never changes, even if I view this on, a very high resolution device. Now that certainly doesn't really work for what we're trying to do today from a mobile device, and this was really a concept that was introduced earlier on in 2000s and isn't something that's really focused today. So then there was the concept of the fluid layout, and I think this is a lot more in the realm of what we're trying to provide with a responsive layout, where you basically just use percentages instead of fixed widths, and instead of the outer zone, right, those outer divs adjusting, the inner content is adjusting itself, and this is nice to be able to make sure that whatever size of desktop that you're using, that you're taking full advantage of that real estate. However, again, it doesn't really relay well back onto a mobile device, because as you shrink it down, there's only so few words that you can fit and so few pixels that you can fit in one of those rich content area zones. So what we've done is we've developed those responsive designs, which sort of take a blend of the both and really take advantage of media queries. So media queries is really the heart of how you're going to build those responsive layouts. Right, media queries allow you to do things like manage the width and the heights of your viewports, determine the heights and the widths of your devices, the orientation, right? Am I in landscape or am I in portrait? What the actual resolution is. So you can get all of that information based on the OS and the browser that you are rendering this on, and then you can develop specific media queries, so this @media within your CSS, which allows you to say, you know what, I want to do X, Y, and Z CSS based on if I have a device that the screen has a minimum width of, let's say 28.75, or then you have another one that says, well, I want to do another X, Y, and Z CSS for a screen resolution with a minimum width of 40.5, right? So now we're taking a look at the grid system that we had developed before and those breakpoints, and now you're starting to develop specific content around that. Now, one thing to keep in mind with media queries and just in general with the content that you're trying to render, especially over mobile devices, the sizes of the images certainly matter. You don't want to be providing, very large and rich images that are going to have to be rendered and downloaded over your mobile networks. So something to keep in mind, and we'll get into this when we show the SharePoint piece of things, is how do I provide smaller images in terms of the actual size of them, not the size itself, but how many megs or bytes the image may take up itself. So I can provide fast downloads of those images and really provide a responsive site when I load that, depending on any form factor that I'm viewing on. So let's talk about some CSS frameworks, and there is a ton of them, right? So you can go and you can download a majority of these are open source, and these really help you just begin to building out of your CSSs and your styles themselves. You know, there's a majority of frameworks, but there's really a top 5 frameworks that are responsive CSS. So anybody that's done some initial Google searches can find that, you know, Twitter Bootstrap is really one of the top of the responsive CSS frameworks that you can model and you can leverage on top of SharePoint, because again, this is all just HTML and CSS. Foundation another, Gumby yet another one. We've got the UI kit, we've got semantic UI. So all of these provide very similar capabilities within the frameworks themselves, and you really can leverage any of these frameworks if you want to build a responsive design. Specifically in SharePoint itself, you can load these things into a master page. You can load these into your, you know, master pages and page layouts gallery and begin to take advantage of the frameworks themselves. Now, let's talk about SharePoint itself. So obviously, SharePoint itself, SharePoint 2013, is not responsive. They certainly have some mobile views, but those are really content-targeted views, and they don't provide you with the rich visualization as you may want to provide to your customers or your clients or your employees themselves. So let's do a quick 101 on SharePoint, right? So the majority of SharePoint's user experience is done within a master page. So that is the highest level. That's where we're going to have our CSS and our JavaScripts and our jQueries, et cetera, and that master page, that layout itself, is going to go across an entire site. Well, we can certainly make a responsive master page where we can adjust we can adjust the width of the pages themselves and any images that we may have in the header, right? We can develop our global navigation. We can change that to be a you know, a clickable icon which expands that navigation, you know, top to bottom. We can build that, but that's just a minor piece of it, right? Because within those master pages, what do we have? Well, we've got a page layout. And anybody that's worked with SharePoint before, especially with, you know, the publishing features, you understand that there's a lot of page layouts out there, and those page layouts themselves, again, are not responsive. So you need to develop some page layouts which now allow you to have that same fluidity as you would within that master page. Well, yet again, you know, those page layouts aren't the lowest common denominator, because those page layouts have web part zones. Yeah, the web part zones are part of the layouts, but you've got to make sure that you have those web part zones that allow for that same expansion. And the most difficult part is really the web parts themselves. So sure, any custom web parts, any content search web parts, any content editor web parts, right? You can easily adjust, or you can easily inject some CSS into those to allow them to be responsive. You know, but what about things like SharePoint lists, list view web parts? Those certainly become difficult, especially as you're trying to cram in as many columns of content as you can. So, you know, when you come to developing an experience for SharePoint that is responsive, you've got to understand that there are some gives and takes. So, you know, providing a 90% responsive design may be good enough for some people, whereas once I get to an actual list view web part, maybe I understand I have to scroll left to right because the information that I want to show is that important. Or what you end up doing is creating sort of a content search web part, which allows you to display that same information from a list view web part, but from a top to bottom view. So, you know, when it goes to designing for SharePoint, again, like I had mentioned earlier, it is recommended to come up with what your desktop design visually will look like, as well as what your mobile design visually will look like, so you can understand where the trade-offs may come. So SharePoint itself also has something called composed looks. Anybody that's tried to brand their SharePoint environment potentially knows what these are. These really don't do a whole lot for us. It allows us to change some color palettes. It allows us to change some fonts, create some background images, update some master pages. But you really can't do a lot in terms of building a responsive design around it, right? It's certainly not ideal, and you really can't do much to test all the different permutations of what you can provide to your end customers in terms of those different form factors. So then what Microsoft has developed, and what I think is a potentially useful capability, is something called a device channel, right? So a device channel now allows you to define a set of devices, a set of operating systems, let's say, and target certain master pages to be leveraged when you're viewing these different devices. So it's nice, again, because now I can say build a iPhone master page. And what I can do is when I build that master page, I'm not thinking about desktops, I'm not thinking about tablets, I'm thinking about only what I want to view from an iPhone itself. Makes testing easy, right? Because you've got a very finite amount of devices that you're going to be testing this against. However, what it ends up meaning is that I've got a whole lot of different master pages out there, right? So you can build your aliases, you can build your different mobile applications, you can include specific devices, right? So we've got that Windows Phone OS there. We can activate some of them, but again, what you end up having is you've got a different set of device channels for those different applications, right? So a mobile one may be somewhat generic, an iOS one may be targeted towards a phone, your Apple phones, and then your defaults are going to be your desktops, etc. So then what you end up doing is when you go to a site where you would specify your master pages, now I'm specifically specifying, I'm setting a specific master page for those various mobile platforms, right? Those various device channels. So again, this is nice to be able to provide that much capability and uniqueness across those sites for those different devices. However, management and support of all of those different master pages really becomes a nightmare, because you're managing anytime you want to change anything across your sites, you've got to do that across all of those different master pages. So it's not necessarily ideal, especially from a management standpoint. Also think of it from a go-to-market standpoint, where I've got to build n number of these different master pages, whereas with a responsive design, yes, I understand that there may be a lot more that goes into the CSS itself, but you're really only developing one master page. So typically you've got a quicker go-to-market from that perspective. So let's talk about image renditions, because this is where I think SharePoint may actually provide some value, as I had discussed before. So in order to create image renditions, obviously you've got to configure your blob cache. I would recommend having an asset library. You're going to need a publishing site for this, etc. But what this allows you to do, and what this is new to SharePoint 2013, is it allows you to upload an image, and it allows you to then define different renditions that you'd like to set for those specific images. So you can define the widths and the heights for those images. And why this is nice is because if you see, I've got a tablet max and I've got a mobile max, right? So I have defined some maximum heights and widths that I'd like to have for those various form factors. So, it's very easy to create. You can create n number of these as well. And what you do is when you upload an image into SharePoint, into one of your asset libraries, if you've got all of this configured, and you have the ability of seeing the design ribbon and clicking on edit renditions, right? So I've uploaded a very large image. And what I want to do is this is going to be used for an image rotator, let's say, that I've got some content set up on for my my landing page. So obviously, if I go into a mobile device, I don't want to use an image that is, 5 megs. So what you can do is you can start setting different images and different image sizes based on the renditions that we've set, right? So I then take that very large image and I can create a mobile max image and I can create a tablet max image. And what it does is it actually does not create multiple images, right? Because that's what we see a lot of people doing, where they'll take the same image and they'll actually cut it up on Photoshop and they'll upload those multiple images, and those multiple images end up having multiple versions and multiple revisions. So now all of a sudden your content databases are expanding far more than they really would need to. So what this allows you to do is take that single image and just set different viewing ports on them, so different sizes of them. And another nice thing you can do is once you're sort of defined that rendition, you can actually cut the image itself. So you can say, you know what, I don't necessarily need to see everything up at the top or everything up at the bottom. You can really focus and you can really target the what you want to show within that image itself. So what I've got here is I'm showing you that I've actually got just a content area, and I've got my main image, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the second image that I uploaded, and I'm going to pick a rendition on it, and I'm going to set that to actually be, let's say, my mobile max image. So now I've got multiple images. Well, no, I'm sorry. I've got a single image with multiple renditions, and those images are actually sized accordingly based on what we've set here. So then what you can do within some CSS, within some media queries that I've showed you before, is you can say, you know what, if I've got a screen that is a max width of 480, so if I'm looking at a mobile device, let's say, I want to use that same image, right? So large image background, but I'm going to use this rendition 6. So that rendition 6 just happens to be tied to that mobile max that I had set. Well, if I've got something that is greater than your mobile but less than 768, maybe I'm going to use rendition 5. And what is that? That was that tablet max rendition that I had set. And then if I'm looking at it from my desktop view, I'm going to end up using that large background image itself. So as you can see, I'm doing a lot of readjusting of sizes, and you're hiding and showing of certain images based on the form factor that you're on. So you can see how you can leverage CSS to be able to adjust the screen viewing and user experience within those various devices itself. So let's just run through an example, a scenario of something that we had developed for one of our customers. They're kind enough to allow us to showcase this. So this is a SharePoint 2013 site that we have developed a desktop view for. You can see I've got my global navigation that sits up at the top. I've got a nice image rotator with decent sized imagery, decent sized content area, as well as I've got some out-of-the-box web parts that sit on the bottom. We've got our calendars. We've got a nice little FAQ sheet. We've got some latest news that's a bit below that. And what we can do is we can actually show what this looks like on a mobile device. So I'm showing this through something that I think everybody should know about and see some value from. So even though we love Microsoft here, Google Chrome has a very nice add-in that allows you to do some testing on a variety of devices, right? So you can open up your developer tools and you can see that you can actually change your devices and it will re-render the image or re-render the web page based on if you were viewing it within that device, right? So I've done that here on the SharePoint site, and you can see that our global navigation is gone. It's been rolled up into that menu. You can see when I click on that menu what happens. It expands. You can see that my image is no longer a left to right with the content being on the right. I've got the image at the top, and I've got the content below it. One thing that you should note, and this is, you can see it up at the top. The Office Suite bar, again, is not something that is responsive itself, and that takes a bit of customizations to do. So maybe you need to do it, maybe you don't. In this choice, the customer decided that it was not a necessity to be able to adjust that Office Suite bar up at the top. So here's yet another example, right? So we had developed a product catalog for these folks, where this is using 100% enterprise search. This is using content search web parts. This is using display templates. So everything you see here is display templates, the refiners, the results, all of that. And as you drill down into a tablet, right? So what we've done is we've taken that global navigation that was set to the right of the search bar, and we've knocked that down a bit, and we've taken our 4-column view down to a 3-column view, and left our refiners where they were. So again, leveraging that fancy Google Chrome emulator, we can show you what it looks like on an Apple iPad. And then moving forward from an Apple iPad, we can show you what that looks like from an actual mobile device. So we've scaled down now from 4 columns of product images into a single column of product images. And what I've done is when you first load the page, you've got your refiners that are set to the top, right? Because visually you're going to think about how I want to refine that content, and then once I refine that content, I can see my search results. So we've hit 50 minutes on the webinar content, and I've gone through a majority of what I wanted to explain. I hope you guys got some value out of it, and I'll pause for a minute and see if we've got any questions in the queue that I may be able to answer.
Okay, it does look like there's one question. Does SharePoint not render CSS Media Queries?
Well, SharePoint does render the CSS Media Queries. So long as you've got a reference to that CSS in your master page, or if you throw that in a content editor web part somewhere on a specific page, but it certainly will render those media queries. That's how all of this was developed.
Another question came in. What are the product services you are offering?
Okay, so we, Microexcel, like I said, we're a systems integrator, right? So we are a managed partner with Microsoft. We're actually a part of their Cloud Solution Provider Program, CSP program, and we offer full services and end-to-end software development lifecycle. So in terms of our general offerings, we do migrations of content, right? Exchange, AD, SharePoint migrations from old version to current versions to the cloud. We develop, custom business solutions. So we can come gather requirements, sit with your business folks, understand what their needs are, develop functional requirements, do the implementation, quality assurance, training, full end-to-end. We offer sort of road mapping and envisioning sessions where we can come in and talk strategically on the technologies that you leverage. What do you use from a Microsoft platform perspective? What Microsoft technology may you be looking for? What kind of agreements do you have? Are they enterprise agreements? Do you purchase your licenses through open licensing, et cetera, et cetera? Offer business intelligence solutions, leveraging again all the Microsoft technologies, developing analysis services, cubes, tabular data models, leveraging Power BI from a visualization perspective for your reports. We can certainly follow up and provide you with a core set of our offerings and get in touch.
Okay, we've got one more question here. Microsoft recently announced a responsive UI package for SharePoint. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was community members basically doing something very similar to what we've done. So we've developed, Microexcel has developed a responsive framework that we provide, whenever we do any of these solutions to our customers, sort of as a value add. That responsive framework that was provided, it's very similar to what we're doing. I think what I'm trying to highlight here is, you can see some real world scenarios where this was developed, sort of walk you through it. It's going to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If you want to use a framework like something that Microexcel has developed, the framework that was developed through that Microsoft community, or any of those other frameworks that I highlighted earlier on. Again, it's just a framework. It's not sort of a packaged template that you can implement. You're still going to have to understand what you're doing from your content perspective and what your business business is looking for. So there's still going to be some type of design required in order to implement that.
Okay, we've got one more question. If someone wanted to remove the default SharePoint ribbon, how would they go about it?
I would say the easiest way to do that would probably be injecting some type of jQuery. So, I mean, that's another thing we really didn't talk too much about. But if you don't want to go and build an entire user experience, master pages and all of that, if you really are just looking to change some of the visualization or some of the functionality within an out-of-the-box SharePoint page, jQuery is a great alternative to that. So you can throw a content editor web part on a page, and you can just insert some jQuery, which is basically some JavaScript libraries, right? And you can find the different HTML IDs and the GUIDs, and you can target new styles within those HTML components, those containers and such, and that jQuery would allow you to then hide it or readjust the size, readjust the color, etc., etc.
Okay, great. Well, that completes the questions that are in the queue. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. We will be following up with a link to the recording, so please feel free to share this with others in the organization. And a reminder that once you exit this webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey, and we would really appreciate that you complete that before you exit. Thanks a lot and have a great day.